evening, South Africa, and a very warm welcome to Afternoon Express. It's always an honor to be with you on a Monday because obviously the weekend has come, it's done and dusted, and we get straight back into a brand new week. We hope you have a good weekend. How was yours?
Yeah, my weekend was great, but I'm entering the week like I'm ready.
Ready. Listen, today's show is going to be jam-packed. I hope you guys are ready for a roller coaster today. We're tackling some very important topics, but ones that really need to be discussed in the open platforms like Afternoon Express today. Sexual abuse is a major issue in South Africa, but one side of the conversation that is often sort of shied away from on public forums is sexual abuse against men and boys. Studies have shown that 1 in 6 men admit to being sexually abused at some point in their youth. Today we share the story of a pastor and motivational speaker, Retsang Simon Kwabane, who experienced abuse as a child at the hands of his own grandmother.
Yeah, and if you're online, please be sure to visit our social media platforms where we want to know from you. Have you ever been affected by male sexual abuse? Tweet us at Afternoon Chats using the hashtag Afternoon Express, or please comment on our Facebook page.
We'll treat those gently, of course. Now, we also bring you a debut author, Ijangolet Sharon Ogwang, who was born in Kenya to Ugandan parents and raised in South Africa. Her story, An Image in the Mirror, also tells the tale of twin sisters who were separated at birth and raised in completely different parts of Africa. Plus, it's another edition of Mommy Mondays with media entrepreneur and superwoman and supermom herself, Joanne Strauss.
So up front, we're joined by Tsholofelo Diale, the founder of Bravado movement, an NPO that tackles socio-economic issues in various communities through initiatives like youth seminars, sports days aimed at people with disabilities and cultural festivals. She's here to share her story of triumph over a series of very difficult circumstances in her youth. Welcome to the Loft. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is obviously quite an incredible initiative that you've started with the NPO, and it covers so many aspects of socio-cultural issues in your environment. But I can't help but feel that everything that you went through led you up to that moment. Take us through some of your earliest difficulties in your childhood.
Regarding Bravado movement, it was honestly inspired by my own personal experiences growing up as a teenager, high school, and actually as a normal teenager. So when I was in grade 10, at the age of 16 years old, I had an illegal abortion at 6 months. So I remember thinking that because of my friends my best friend at the time knew what I was going through, I felt like that was enough. I didn't need anyone else. I felt like I had somebody to share it with, until I actually went ahead and had the legal abortion, and I felt like I was alone practically. So at 4 months, I went to a public hospital to try and see if I could terminate, but I didn't know how far along I was at the time. So they took
and obviously you're doing this in secret. You're all on your own, and you're treading cautiously.
I'm actually also missing school.
Yes.
So my parents think that I've gone to school, but I'm actually trying to, at the time, think I'm trying to let go of a burden. Yeah, that's just hovering and following me wherever I go. So I went to the public hospital and I was told that no, I'm too far along. I'm 4 months pregnant and I can't actually do it. It's legal. And then I went home. From there on, someday I was going to school and I saw a poster on the street pole saying safe abortion, pain-free, and all of that. And I took down the number and I called them. I was probably around about 21 weeks then, which is like 5 months pregnant.
Sure.
And then I called them and I told them that I would like to have an abortion. And then they told me where they were. And then they said I should make time and come through. Asked them how much it would be. They asked me how far along I was, and then they told me it would be 600 rand.
Sure.
And
the father, nowhere to be seen?
The father, he was around.
Okay.
He didn't know I was pregnant, but he didn't know what I was planning to do. Yeah. So
that experience that you went, obviously, to these illegal abortion clinics, I mean, tell us about that whole, it was a traumatic.
Yeah. When you call them and speak to them on the phone, they will give you a sense of safety. So first of all, I had never been to that place. So I went there and I was shocked. And when I got there, I was taken to a room where it's like a building. Kind of looks deserted, but yeah. And then you are taken in by this man. You don't know where you're going. You don't know what's going to happen to you. There's a smell that I can still think of when I'm talking about it now. And they lead you, well, they ask you if you've got the money. Yes, I've got the money. You give them the money. And then they take you into a room where you want to go because if you feel like you really don't want to have this baby. But and then again, what if this is the end? Nobody ever knows that I'm here. So I get into the room and there's a woman in there. The safety that they were talking about, you really feel like you're not safe because of the manner in which she's approaching you and how she's talking to you and how she's telling you to lie down on the floor like this. And you literally just there.
You're just there and you go through this traumatic event.
I don't want to put you through that now to talk through that whole experience again, because I'm sure it must have left a lot of scarring in your life. But I mean, all of this led to what you've started now with this project. And I'm very keen to know about why you're focusing your energy towards boys, especially in the community, in your particular community, and where the name Bravado came up and the work that you do there. What inspired it?
Because we had already started an empowerment program for young girls called Leader Young Women, I felt that it was necessary to have a balance where when we go to schools and ask for young girls in particular, we are told that, what about our boys? Which is true. And we've seen growing up how boys can be very rowdy, they can act in a certain manner which is not very manly-like. And when we think about the articles we read about how who our children are going to marry. So practically me as well, being single and looking around and you're thinking, what difference can I make? What is it that is not being done? So
that wasn't done for me.
So it didn't only just start now. I used to have teen sessions with boys and girls, and you could see how vulnerable the boys would be and how they want to be loved. And that's where it came from. And I remember in 2014 when we invited Jamie Bartlett over, he did say, young boys just want to be hugged. They want to be kissed on the cheek as well. And as soon as we think of such things, we're thinking, no, we're making them girly-like or something like that. So I wanted an approach that said, we care about you. So that's where I thought of starting Adopt a Boy Child, which will officially be launched in June on the 30th.
And you have other initiatives under the NPO. Can you just list them for us?
So with the most recent one called Skin Deep, that's where I'm actually working with Loiso McDonald because he was sexually assaulted. And with that initiative, that's where we go to schools and talk to young boys, where before we even start, we ask them, have you had such a thing before? Guests are actually visiting young boys and not just the whole school. And they say no. So yeah, that's it's Adopt a Boy, Skin Deep, which is combined with Adopt a Boy Child, and then also the Leader Young Women Initiative.
Wow, you're really doing amazing work. And what do you hope people to get from your initiatives after they've gone through, say, a couple of sessions?
What I'm hoping for, like our tagline, striving from hand to hand, take something from us that you can use for someone else. It is also with, like, for instance, we're not funded and we've been running for 5 years now, but it's more of how can you get empowered to empower someone else? What tools can you use without always just saying, I need a donation, I need this. After the donation is done, what are you going to take with you to actually say, this is how I'm going to survive?
And it's also not somebody coming from the outside saying like, oh, well, you need to learn these lessons. You've been through it. You know what it's like to suffer and you continue wanting to kind of feed that back into the community. And so just from Afternoon Express side, I just want to salute all the work that you are doing. Hopefully many more boy children and girl children will grow up to be as strong and as powerful as you are in supporting the community.
To you.
Thank you.
What an amazing soul. You guys, please share some love on social. #Afternoon Express. After the break, we turn our attention to a subject that is not often discussed in South Africa, as we discussed earlier on, focusing particularly on sexual abuse against men and boys.
And we'll be chatting to inspirational speaker and pastor Retsang Simon Kwabane, who shares his story of child abuse at the hands of his grandmother. We also head to the kitchen with Chef Aya, who's back in the loft to make a decadent treat called banana blondies.
Made with love by Clover.
Well, welcome back to Afternoon Express. We know Mondays are dull, but they're about to become so much more delicious. They call for an incredibly addictive and indulgent sweet treat to make sure that the rest of the week just flows better. Join us as we whip up a batch of Clover Super M Banana Blondies by SMSing the keyword Clover to 33650 at a cost of R1.50. You'll get a list of all the ingredients you need to make it along with us on the show. Chef Aya, aka the Cook Do, joins us on the show today again. You always make these most decadent treats.
Yeah.
So show us how to do this one.
I'm very excited to share this recipe today with everyone, including you and the guests at home. So we are making a Clover Super M Banana Blondies, and for those who don't know what our banana blondies are, it's the same family as brownies, but it's just that you use white chocolate instead of dark chocolate.
Yummy.
So now I'm gonna cream now. I've already creamed my eggs, my sugar.
So that's the eggs and the sugar?
So this is eggs and sugar that I've creamed already, and my butter. So I'm gonna add quickly my vanilla essence in there to just give it that nice fragrance and a nice flavor to it.
Oh, yeah, 'cause I imagine vanilla and white chocolate go well together.
So, Super M comes in 4 flavors. As you can see here, you have the banana flavor that I'm going to be using now for this. Is like a half a cup, or you can use the whole one if you want to, depending on how much flour you're using. And you also have like the chocolate flavor. You have the
cream soda and strawberry.
Yeah. So I'm putting in my pecan nuts in. Awesome.
Yummy.
Yeah, and then you can help me out quickly with that.
Sure, this is the flour.
So this is the flour with baking powder and baking soda.
Okay, that should keep them nice and light.
Yeah.
So the more baking soda and flour you put in, baking soda you put into the flour, obviously the more fluffy up they become. So obviously with all these kind of recipes, you want to be able to play around and ensure that you get the consistency you're looking for. If you're used to making brownies at home, like if that's what your sort of go-tos, try this out. It's just something different. And the smell of this banana soup in here is so yum. It's like a mixture of a banana bread and a brownie with white chocolate. It's amazing.
And I mean, with this recipe, you can also use the same method and everything, but you can use the chocolate flavor if you want to make like chocolate brownies for it. So,
Stunning.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's a low-fat flavored milk. That's what Super is. Yeah.
And I only learned the other day that did you know that you can have these things served hot or cold? So basically just buy yourself a whole batch of them at home, keep them in the fridge, and then if you kind of make a recipe, great. And if you don't, just drink the rest of them.
And look at this, how interesting is this? So this is like banana chips. They are dipped in like white chocolate. You let them sit aside for like 5 minutes to be dry. It's either you chop them or you keep them as a whole, you know.
Nice.
And then you just add them there.
That is smart. Can I still want to taste it?
Yeah, taste it. It tastes awesome.
Oh, yum.
So this is the
banana slices. That's what this is. Just dipped in white chocolate.
This is the consistency you want. You're looking for this.
The lighter, more liquidy the consistency, I'm assuming the more decadent and chewy that blondie will become.
Because you don't want your brownies, your blondies to be like really, really dry.
Lovely. Then that just gets popped to the oven.
You pop in the oven for like 180 degrees, 30 minutes, and yeah, voila.
And voila, you have your very own banana-flavored blondies brought to you by Clover and Soup M. How delicious is this? It'll certainly brighten up a Blue Monday if you're perhaps having one. Just try and make a treat for yourself. First of all, the indulgence of making a recipe is always so good, and the taste is going to top it all, I promise you. Remember to SMS the keyword Clover to 33650 to get this recipe sent straight to your mobile device. And in case you miss anything along the way, your drool hit the, remote in the meantime. Here's a quick recap.
Made with love by Clover.
We return now to our topic on Afternoon Express today, the one that you guys have been sharing all your thoughts on social media for. Keep them coming through, #Afternoon Express, and go and find the topic on our Facebook page as well, because sexual violence in South Africa is a very, very serious issue. But one area that is often not discussed is abuse against men and boys in particular. Studies have shown that 1 in 6 boys in South Africa are sexually abused before the age of 18. Other studies have shown that statistics might even be higher than that.
Yeah. So we're joined now by Retsang Simon Kwabane, who's an inspirational speaker and pastor who's been vocal about his own experience of child abuse at the hands of his grandmother. Welcome to The Loft.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for having the courage to come and share your story with us. Yeah.
So tell us about this incident that you had with your grandmother, and at what point in your life did you realize that this is what was happening?
I realized, I think, 3 years back, because when it was happening, I was very young. I think I was around 10 or 12. So I didn't know what was happening, because in our society, we don't talk about such things. So, but when I grew up, I just heard people talking about molestation. Yeah, then I had to research about it. What is that all about? And then I just figured that this is what I've been experiencing when I was young.
And do you feel like you suppressed some of the memories in one way or another?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
How did you suppress those?
I just chose not to talk about like what I was experiencing, and then I shifted that to start watching pornographies and like doing the masturbation and stuff like that, to just shy away from what was happening.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for us to kind of understand the internal process that actually takes place when someone turns to something like pornography or masturbation. What do you think it actually is? It's that there's maybe these emotions that are surfacing and this pain or shame that then gets displaced onto something else. How would you describe it?
I think psychologically I was very like messed up, and emotionally I didn't struggle at all. But psychologically there was a problem with me, because when I look at women, I would look at them in a certain way that is not proper, and then it will eventually lead me to like want to watch pornography or like.
Yeah.
I think it breaks your relationship with sort of normal sexual behavior, because I think you're experiencing something that's slightly more heightened or just not real. It's like a surreal version.
Inappropriate.
But for the young children that are out there, perhaps who are in families, and for perhaps mothers or grandmothers who are watching now, would you mind, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, what exactly was happening with your grandmother and how it is that you found out that this was not something that was normal?
Like every time, like on weekends, I would go and visit her, and then during the night, like she would like touch me in a way that is not like appropriate. But I didn't know like what was happening, because I was young, and this thing, it's something that we don't hear. Like people talking about it.
It was normal to you. It was normal to go visit grandma.
It was. So like that's what she was doing. Like,
I mean, your grandmother's now late. Did you ever get an opportunity to confront her?
No, I never spoke to her about it. And I think after I discovered this thing was wrong, I started to distance myself from her. And like my mom and my siblings, they would ask me why you don't go to your grandmother like you used to. But I didn't tell them, because it wasn't easy for me like to just open up about it, because they don't believe these things, because it's something that they think it doesn't happen.
Absolutely. You're now a motivational speaker and a pastor, and you obviously speak very openly about these incidences on your platforms. Do you find that it's encouraged other young men to come forward and speak to you specifically about similar abuse that they've experienced?
Yeah, but the thing is that they don't talk about it, because for black men or a black child, you don't hear this thing being said. So like it becomes difficult for them to open up, because they would say like men don't cry and stuff like that. So we grow up with that mentality. So for boys to open up about such things, it's something that doesn't exist. And if you want to open up about it, they look at you in some way that it's like you are not normal. Like, what are you talking about?
So what is the solution for young boys who are going through the stuff? You then clearly are encouraging them to speak up. Who do they go and speak to? Because parents will turn around and just ignore the issue. Perhaps even grandparents will do the same thing. So who do young boys speak to in scenarios like this?
From my experience, I've never spoken to anybody until I met my girlfriend, who happened to be my wife now. And
Congratulations.
Then, thank you so much. So like, because she was having a problem with me. Like sometimes I would be flirting with girls because I wanna feed this lustful desire, and then she would ask like, "What's going on with you? Like, why are you flirting with girls? Why are you texting at some time?" And then I just had to be open with her. Like, this is what happened when I was young. I think this is why I'm behaving in this way.
Yeah. And tell me like the steps you took in terms of just healing yourself and healing your ideas around what happened. Was there a time when you felt shame, or when you felt like it was your fault, or that you asked for it? Any of those like very defeatist thoughts?
The only thing that I can say it helped me a lot, it's my relationship with God. Because like, you know, when you go to church, you will hear like pastors preaching about like self-control and like knowing like who you are in Christ and all of that. So like my foundation in the Lord, it's the one thing that kept me like going, because every time when the temptation comes, like I would kneel down and pray and ask God to help me, because this is something that I know it's like it's not what I have to do. It's something that is against my belief and all of that.
But it's beyond you, and it's beyond your own sort of, you know, human experience. It's something that outside of you that you can look towards to say like, hey, I don't have this capacity inside of me, but you do out there in the big world.
Yeah, because honestly speaking, it's so difficult. It is, because you are used to like...
It's addictive. It's an addiction.
Yeah,
It's clinically diagnosed.
And now the sad thing is that you can't even open up about it. So you're dealing with it on your own. You're just depending on God, because you are even shy and embarrassed to open up to maybe to psychologists about it, or hey, this is what I've been going through.
But
You're a
so
brave
thank
man.
you so much, Resang, for coming to share. And anyone who's watching out there, I'm sure are a bit more encouraged to speak to someone or seek help. So
Indeed,
thank
yeah,
you.
please do. If you are somebody who's experienced this, you know somebody who has, please encourage them to speak out to the right people and ensure that they get the support. Give a boy child a hug if they've been through something like this. It really, really is important to embrace.
Absolutely. And it's important that we have these conversations in public. And if you'd like to add any of your experiences to the conversation, head over to our social media platforms and share your story with us. It's at Afternoon Chat on Twitter using the hashtag Afternoon Express, or you can find us on Facebook.
We'll treat those gently, of course. Now, we'll continue the chat later on in the show, but after the break, we meet author Sharon Ogwang, and she got a new name which she's going by, which is finally her maiden name, which we're excited to explore on the show today, who just released her debut novel, and it's called Image in a Mirror. Stay tuned.
Finding a versatile product that's used in just about every aspect of your life is really hard. Or is it? I just discovered the entire range of Glad Zip Seal, and I've started using it in the kitchen, in the office, and at home. But let's talk about how I use it in the kitchen for now. The Glad Zip Seal essentially seals tight, locking in all that freshness. And those two strips, being the yellow one and the blue one, are there for a reason. Once you seal it perfectly tight, they turn green. You can use these bags for ingredients, leftovers, for work lunches. My favorite is when I take them to picnics and I pack a super snack pack. Another one of my favorite features is this write-on strip, which makes labeling and storing so much easier. Also, you can write a little personal note to someone. So just like that, with the perfect snacks and the perfect seal, you're done. Voila.
Welcome back to Afternoon Express, live on SABC3. We're very excited for our next guest. She's returning a second time to the loft. She's born in Kenya to Ugandan parents and raised in South Africa. Ijangolet Sharon Ogwang experienced a true diversity of cultures growing up.
Indeed. So now a small business analyst by profession, she has a passion for storytelling and recently released her debut novel, An Image in a Mirror, which tells the tale of twin sisters separated at birth and raised in different parts of Africa who finally... I won't say the rest.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
So something interesting that you just said was that the idea was to have the book shaped like a mirror.
Yes.
Hence the slender frame.
Yeah.
I also like it because it perfectly fits into the hand. It's like one of those books where you have to awkwardly have your hand at the back. It like fits perfectly. It's awesome.
So I'm always thrilled when South African authors take on fiction, because the myth is that fiction doesn't sell in Africa.
Yeah.
What made you venture into fiction?
So I thought that the thing with fiction is that it allows you to approach a story from so many different angles. So it's less constraining as nonfiction often is. So because I wanted to cover a story that, for instance, takes place across 2 different African countries, and having not grown up in Uganda, the only way to write about it was to write fiction. But also, I do think fiction plays an important role in allowing people to engage with social issues, but falling in love with character in order to engage with those social issues.
That's why I love cartoons so much, is because they're really attacking huge social issues, which kids just don't realize. I think it's just fun to watch, but there's some hectic things being said in there. So what do you deal with in the book?
So I mean, there's a variety of themes, but some of the themes on the top of my mind is often you don't hear about the immigrant's experience within Africa. So you hear a lot more about what it means to move to the US or to the UK, which is a void I found in literature. I also speak to the Roads Must Fall movement and creating the feeling around what it could have been like to be a kid in that class and some of the internal issues that are happening. Because I think that was one of the stories that people often engage at surface level and almost immediately assert an opinion without thinking about, listen, these are 22-year-olds, these are 19-year-olds, and what could it have meant to be in a classroom or on campus during that time? It's also very much feminist, and it speaks about a feminism all the way from the village to a feminism in the city. And it speaks about what it looks like to exist in all those spaces and to be feminist, but for it to look different when you're a mother in a village who has to do certain things. Or,
and I guess, I mean, besides just tackling issues of identity, hence the mirror theme, it also sounds like it's a coming-of-age story for young women. Why did that particularly appeal to you? Because I think authors all have an area of life that they're just completely drawn to, and it's the one thing they want to talk about.
So with having written it in 2 different countries, the coming-of-age theme was a very interesting one to explore because it looks so different in these 2 contexts. So what does it look like to come of age in a village, but what are the assumptions we make about a girl coming of age in a village? And being able to dispel that, but also looking at the city and looking at the internal conflict in coming of age, because I think sometimes we approach such ideas from a very simplistic way, and to be able to write character into it and experience into what it looks like to come of age and the different thoughts you go through and how you evolve as a person.
The topic we're discussing on the show today is particularly pertinent to that kind of story because I feel like a lot of people have these conversations about nature and nurture and you know, how do we become the people that we are? Is it about the environment we grow up in? Is it about what happens to us? Are we intrinsically the people that we are? And you've got these 2 girls. I know you give it away at the end of at the back of the book, but they get to meet, and I think they've lived in such different spaces in the world. Do you tackle these issues of what influences who they are? Do they find similarities in themselves just genetically?
So they do. There's definitely similarities, but there's also stark differences. And I particularly like the final chapter because that's the chapter where you get to experience a lot of their thoughts on each other. So the one will be like, I'm standing here right now and I'm nervous. The other one will be like, look at her. She looks like she doesn't fit in this space. She looks like she's enjoying the attention. So almost seeing firsthand how 2 people can experience the same moment and interpret it differently was important for me. So there are definitely similarities, but there are also stark differences and assumptions based on what the one in the village thinks about the one who left and what it means to stay behind and what that places on you. So I fundamentally believe that we are a function of our experiences to a certain degree, but there is definitely a bit of intrinsic nature that also informs who we are.
How much of your experience as Kenyan, Ugandan, growing up in the Eastern Cape, have you inserted into the narrative? Do you find that there's parts of your experience that are displayed in both the sisters' lives?
So it's interesting because some of my closest friends are like, both these girls are you. And I'm like, no, I'm not these people. So it's interesting. I definitely think having grown up the way I did in the Eastern Cape, in a small town in the Eastern Cape, having been brought up in a Ugandan traditional home and having visited all these spaces has informed my way of writing and has informed my ability to write about duality and to be very comfortable with contrasting ideas being put next to each other and allowing those ideas to coexist, which has definitely informed my writing. In terms of the immigrant experience, to a certain extent, it was a bit informed by my own experience, although I try to layer it in the sense that I do think it's very different when you're in the middle class to when you're in a low income bracket. And I try to write about both those voices and what it looks like to exist in that space. So that's where I wrote in a little bit about myself, but the rest isn't me. I promise. The rest isn't me.
I'm intrigued to know, just briefly, because obviously I don't want to be promoting any kind of publishers individually, but I think I'm just interested to know, I'm excited to see South African novels being released. What is the process like? Is it difficult to release a novel like this in South Africa at the moment?
Not when you're going with Blackbird Books.
No.
Shout out to Tabiso.
Yes, shout out.
Yeah, good.
Shout out.
The brains behind the cover.
Yeah.
So there is a process behind it that is possible. Like young girls who want to write books should be encouraged to do so.
Absolutely. And I think the hardest thing is you don't know it's possible until you do it. So as cliche as that sounds, it's true. Because I mean, for me to write it over a year and a half was just, I was just hoping that something comes of it, but you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And then I sent it out to 3 publishing houses. I was actually applying for this award with Jakana Media, and Tabiso tells a story about how she came across my manuscript and she's like, listen, I want this, we can go big with this. And then she contacted me and she was like, hey, I like it. And it was a lot easier than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's encouraging to know that there's room for these sorts of stories.
Yes.
Because I find that news articles can capture stories to a certain extent, but they don't often do stories justice. And that's where fiction for me becomes important to allow character and humane interaction to inform history and to inform what it means to exist as people.
You're amazing, and I cannot wait to read it.
Yeah.
I really can't.
Yeah, thank you so much for contributing to Africa's fiction voice
Yes.
as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Coming up after the break, it's time for another edition of Momi Monday with Jan Strauss. And today we focus the discussion around child abuse.
Indeed. Now, babies and toddlers are unable to effectively communicate, and it's important as parents to understand how to teach them about the dangers and also what signs to look out for when they are experiencing abuse, especially at that age. We'll be right back with that and so much more.
This Thursday evening at 7:30 on Presenter Search on 3, the City of Gold awaits as auditions head to Johannesburg.
We're expecting the biggest television personalities. Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, there's so much talent. I wish you were just here.
Join us. You know you want to.
That's Presenter Search on 3, Thursday nights at 7:30 on SABC3. Repeat Saturdays at 12 midday. The stage is yours.
Well, welcome back to Afternoon Express. We're live on SABC3. Big thank you to everybody who's been engaging our conversation today using the hashtag Afternoon Express. We're reading through all of your comments and your stories as well. Now, besides watching Baxter and Donut's journey on Afternoon Express, you can also see more of these two by following them on Instagram as well. So while you're online, go head over there. You can search for Adventures of Donut and Adventures of Baxter for a closer look into the lives both in and out of the loft.
They're cute, they're cuddly, and they're TV stars. Baxter and Donut, the adorably fluffy four-legged members of the Afternoon Express family, are sharing their daily adventures on social media. To see what Baxter and Donut get up to behind the scenes, follow the Adventures of Baxter and the Adventures of Donut on Instagram.
It's time for another edition of Mommy Monday on Afternoon Express, and we welcome back media entrepreneur and founder of Modern Mommy, Joanne Strauss. And studies have found that in South Africa, more than a third of children have experienced some form of sexual abuse in their lifetime. This includes unwanted touching, being forced to have intercourse, flashing or unwanted exposure to sexual activity. And no child should have to go through any form of abuse, but sadly many children do at the hands of sexual predators. Often parents find themselves not knowing what to do or how to prevent abuse before it happens. But Babalo, a social worker from Childline, is here today to shed light on how parents can combat child abuse. Welcome, Babalo.
Thank you so much.
Babalo, thanks so much for being here. And I think viewers have been commenting saying what a hard-hitting topic we have today, but it's a topic that needs to be addressed. I think all of us sitting here as moms, we hear these statistics, we hear about what's happening to our children. But for me, I want to find out, as a social worker, how is it that a child and a toddler, say a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, how are they able to actually communicate what's going on, or how do we as adults know what should we be looking out for?
Thank you for having me here. I think, Joanne, it is very difficult to be able to identify a 3-year-old that has been, whether they've been raped or they've been sexually abused. However, some children do show signs, they throw tantrums, some children throw tantrums, and we need to understand that each and every child is different. Some children get abused and, they move on up until they get, old, and then that's when it hits. But I think some of the signs that we can look at is, if your child is having nightmares, if your child is having behavioral problems, wetting her or his bed. Also, if, often we get notices from teachers that, so-and-so is having a problem at school, is there something going on? So it's very difficult. It's very, very, I won't lie, it's very difficult with the toddlers, even with the counselling, because a 3-year-old
they don't
just
even know
wants
what
to
their
play.
private parts
They don't even know
called.
what private parts are. So
and you know what compounds the difficulty for me as well is that children keep going through these developmental cycles, right? So suddenly the kids are throwing more tantrums than ever before. And then so if your mind quickly goes to, is something happening that shouldn't be happening? Oh my God. And then you overreact.
But what was interesting for me today is the fact that we notice so much abuse against boy children. And I think there's always been so much focus about the abuse against girls. But that's been so hard-hitting. I mean, as somebody who works with Childline, and do you notice that there's an increase in cases against or perpetration against boys?
There is an increase, but it's still the girls that are coming in with the referrals. However, I think because of the society that we live in, we raise the boys to be masculine. Boys don't cry. Boys, So I don't think man up. If something happens with you, with whatever abuse it is, whether it's sexual, physical, or emotional, we always tell children, don't cry, you're a boy. So I don't think many boys are coming out. And I don't think as a society we are creating that environment whereby a boy child can come and say, you know what, so-and-so happened to me, because we are expecting this to only happen to girls. So I think we also, as a society, we need to start talking about this more often.
We just need to show up more.
We need to show up, definitely.
And I'm almost tempted to think that the first conversation you have with your child, perhaps about, is this happening? Is somebody touching you inappropriately? That might not be when it comes out.
Yes,
it's almost
definitely.
like something that you have to keep revisiting and asking those questions over and over until it becomes a normal conversation in your household. So how do we equip parents to actually ask children, what's going on? Have you noticed noticed anything that you don't like? Is somebody touching you in a way that's...
I think what parents should do, or caregivers, from a young age, you know, start to teach a child, speak about physical abuse, speak about emotional abuse, speak about sexual abuse, you know, have body songs that, you know, no one touches my breast, no one touches my, you know, my private parts.
So that the kids have
so
an
that
awareness,
they know that
yes.
when it happens, there's something wrong, you know. If there's someone beating you at school, you know, are you being neglected? Start having these conversations so that when something does happen, you know, it's more easier for the child to come and report it.
Absolutely. And the child also, I think, needs to understand that it's not their fault.
Yes.
Because I think, you know, in terms of the communication, at least if the shame is taken away, I think that also makes a huge
difference. The shame and the guilt that the children experience, you know, because certain children, they just feel that, you know, I've gone through this pain. I don't want my mommy to know, or I don't want my father to know, you know, because sometimes kids get abused by the breadwinners. So if the child discloses, you know, the child's thinking, if I tell, you know, that my dad is abusing me, then we're not going to have bread.
A roof over our heads.
Do you get what I mean? So children, if we can try to remove the shame and the guilt that the children have, I think, you know, our society would be much better.
Yeah.
But Bonnie, isn't it also scary though? And Babalwa, we were chatting about this. South Africa is one of the highest incidences of abuse against children, against the most vulnerable in our society.
Yeah.
How do you think as a society we can address this? Because this is not just a problem that exists in somebody else's household. It's across socioeconomic thresholds and it's really such a big problem, especially in South Africa.
I think even as parents and caregivers, the first step maybe is for us to educate ourselves about all the types of abuses and for us to create environments for our children to be able to come and speak to us. Because I know in certain, for instance, like where I come from, it's not easy for me to just say whatever to, you know, to my father. But we need to create, you know, environments where children can come and speak to you about anything. Because the moment you have that bond with your child, your child will be able to tell you, you know, whatever, or whether it be at school, whether it be, you know, wherever they are, the cricket field, because these things happen everywhere. Children get abused
everywhere.
At school, children get abused at the crèche. You don't know where to take your child.
Well, this is the thing. The places that you think are the places of safety.
And the people that you think,
the people that you trust.
Yes, the people that you trust. You expect a mother or father to be the ones protecting, and yet...
And, you know, to speak to what you just mentioned about why is the incident of abuse high in South Africa? I mean, another socio-cultural contributor is the fact that we are living in a country where more than 50% of people live beyond the poverty line. Yes. So people are working parents, they're not around. So neglect is the key beginning or cornerstone of abuse, where children are left for hours unaccounted for, nobody knows where they are. And how can situations like that be combated?
It's very difficult, Bonnie, because within South Africa, poverty is very high.
Yeah.
So what do you say there now? The parents mustn't go, but the parents need to provide food on the table. But I think as parents and as a society, we need to try and be more hands-on. It's not just, you know, we shouldn't take my child as my child, you know?
It takes a village to raise a child.
It takes a village. But how do we surround ourselves with the village we trust?
We have to build that village we trust, I suppose. Or I don't know. I mean, it's a difficult
It's very difficult because you build, for instance, you build trust with, you know, your intimate family, your mother, your father, and yet...
And our stories today as well, the guests that you've had.
Yeah, the previous, it's the grandmother, you know?
You don't know.
Absolutely. So you find out that perhaps something untoward is happening or your child is susceptible to abuse. Where do you start?
Firstly, if you know, okay, or you speculate, first report it to the police. And I also advise that you go to the nearest social development and go report the abuse. Or maybe you're at home and you're thinking, I want to be anonymous about this. You're more than welcome to contact us on our crisis line. And you can always
I see Childlines also on Twitter, so I see you guys are social media savvy. So get the point across.
So if you want to report abuse, you can always do it telephonically on our crisis line on 08000 55555. And you can just call in, and then the person who receives the call will then refer it. But do something. Don't just keep quiet. When you know that, you know, when you see irregular behaviors, maybe your next door neighbor
And rather be safe than sorry, because that's the other thing. I think a lot of times you might notice behavior and you're like, oh, this child is acting untoward, but maybe it's just a phase. Rather check it out, I would imagine.
And listen to your child.
And believe them.
I was about to say that. Believe your children. Believe them, because I don't think a child will just come randomly and say, so-and-so is abusing me. You know, sometimes we brush the children away that, no, I'm too tired now. We can't talk now, you know. Listen to your child. See the signs. If your child is, you know, the marks at school are declining, try to find out what is it. You know, be your child's friend so that your child can be able to tell you these things.
Yeah.
Be a listening ear. I think it starts with us. And when it does happen, we need to be able to accept, because once we don't accept, you know, what's going on, for instance, if you know your child was being sexually abused and you don't accept, then your child can never get the help if you're not going to be able to speak out.
My heart is in my throat. These conversations always do that to me, but it's so important that we have them.
I'm so glad that you are using this platform to get the message across there. Thanks so much, Bravado.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us again for Mummy Monday, Jan. Now, if you have any more questions or you'd like to get in touch with Childline, you can call them on their toll-free helpline, 08000 55 555. Sounded American.
Very much.
We'll be back again next week with Joanne for another edition of Mummy Mondays. See you after the break.
Welcome back to Afternoon Express. We're live on SABC3 on this Monday afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us for a very difficult conversation, but one that definitely needs to happen. All our guests are on the couch with us today, and thanks for all the messages on Facebook, the tweets, etc. It's really been inspiring to see you share your stories as well.
Yeah. Well, so we were just saying during the break, I was like, I'll lay hands on someone. I will kill someone if somebody touches my kids.
Unfortunately, we're saying it on national TV, so if people know where we are. But we were saying the same thing. It's amazing how vulnerable you feel again, you know, thinking that people out there, especially people who you trust, are the ones who are perpetrating.
Yeah. Is the abuse nuanced when it's somebody that the child looks to for protection and really trusts? Does it take longer, do you think, for the child to come out and speak?
I think it does take longer because now you need to understand that the child probably looks up to that person. Even if it's a father or a mother that abuses, the child still loves the person, regardless of what the person has done. So I think it does take longer, Bonnie, for the child to actually come and speak up, because now the child must also think, is anyone going to believe me? You know, so when it's someone closer, I think it does take longer than if it was a random person.
I'm dying to know, in this conversation, also don't want to make it feel like the person who's been through this is kind of the end of the line, shame, pity, there's this whole like scenario of like, you're not going to be able to get back up. I know lots of young men in my life who have been through sexual abuse and have come out and said like, this has become their vocational direction, they want to work it. It's not the end line. You come out more powerful than you have ever before. What has been your experience about talking about it? Has more healing come? Do you feel like you are moved on from this? Do you feel like it was a chapter in your past?
Yeah, because like the time I started like opening up about it, like the pain was just starting to come out from like my heart, and I think what other guys need to do is to open up about it. I know it's not easy, but like they should try hard, and this is an awareness to even parents to start like paying a close attention to boys. Like they should just try to ask them, are you okay? Like they should just do that.
Break down the idea that we don't communicate. We have to be open and honest, and respect doesn't mean we don't address the difficult issues. It actually means let's speak about everything. So I feel it was interesting also in between we had a chance to chat and so on. I think it's a really, really hard content matter, subject matter, but the way you're empowering other people through what you've been through is so inspiring. So thank you for bringing your message and for really just helping so many people in your situation and others.
Absolutely. And just one last question. Is there a way or a way of conversation or certain phrases or sentences that a parent can specifically speak to their child that perhaps triggers easier conversation? Like, how do you ask it? What's the right way to ask?
There's no right way, basically. You just need to, I think the conversation just needs to start. There's no, my child, what happened to you? You can start the conversation anyway, you know. It needs to be a flow, you know, because once you start talking about it, I think especially the boys, they'll be, or you do something that boys enjoy. You go on the field, you play soccer, and then you start trying to,
And don't
engage.
get shocked when they say it. Do not go like, what?
Try and, definitely.
Be a safe space. Tsholofelo, you've been through a lot in your life, and I'm just keen to know your own personal coping mechanisms. For somebody who's been through this, who perhaps is hiding at the moment, what are your coping mechanisms, and how can you share those with the country?
As I was speaking to Joanne there, I was thinking to myself, I got a bit teary, thinking about somebody could be going through the same thing that I went through or something even worse. So I believe, honestly, talking about it, like you said, sharing your story, only you can tell your story the best way you can. And forget about people judging you, because I got a lot of that. I was on a TV program when I was 16. I spoke about it, and people used to call me by the TV program's name. So keeping your head up and actually saying, you know what, I'm doing this for myself, but for someone else, and I'm doing this to actually say that it's possible to survive everything.
Absolutely.
You guys are heroes. Thank you.
And in the spirit of also just it takes a village to raise a child, if your child comes home and mentions that another child at school told them something about that's happening to them, do not be silent. Contact the school and bring attention to it. Join us again tomorrow, same time, for the Afternoon Express Cook-Along. Our special guest is bubbly actress and TV personality Felicity Reekin. Head over to afternoonexpress.co.za for the recipe. Get your ingredients together and cook dinner along with us live on air.
We'll see you then. Thanks for joining the conversation. Thanks to all of our guests for joining us on the show today. Keep the conversation happening on social media. #Afternoon Express. Good night, South Africa. Thanks for joining us.
Afternoon Express, made with love by Clover.
Another feel-good production.